Welcome to our 25th episode of Your Technology Questions Answered, and today we're going to be talking about pin and chip cards. You're at strike 3. Yes, I'm pointing this commentary towards financial institutions, banks, and credit card companies because today's topic, we're going to be analyzing the history of the credit and debit card payment system. So folks, I have only several things to point out today. I will piss you off. I will teach you something, and you will learn how to protect yourself, and also have the probable inspiration of doing like me and calling up your financial institution, credit card companies, and banks and suggesting the technologies that I will suggest because they should have been implemented before. So let's start off with 1960, the birth of the magnetic stripe. An engineer from IBM named Forrest Perry actually had tried to bind a magnetic stripe, a form of magnetic tape used currently at the time to store information, onto a plastic card to be used for various things, amongst all else, as our debit and credit cards. Now, although technically it is his wife that found a solution using her iron to bind it to the card, and not him trying to use glues, it is him, not her, that is ultimately considered the father of the magnetic stripe card. So, now that we've gotten that across, the magnetic stripe card currently used for debit, interact, and credit card transactions has a series of set standards that you can even check on Wikipedia that actually allow people to be able to copy the information, understand it, and transpose this information onto another card, allowing for something called cloning to occur. This is the birth of financial fraud through the digital millennia. This is strike 1. It is a very small strike because at this point encryption is not available yet to anybody except for the militaries, especially because in the United States it's considered a weapon. And it has been considered a weapon until very recently. Now, until recently, magnetic stripe payment was the only way to pay anything, until the birth of PayPass. Now, PayPass is supposed to be extremely convenient, but like all other things convenient, that means it's more dangerous. The convenience with this thing would be to allow you to use a chipped keychain or a plastic card, tap it on a receiver, and send your payment digitally without signing a receipt or entering a PIN number. Now, this would be almost perfect except for a few things. It is not encrypted in a time where encryption is now widely available. Therefore, because the standards are also very easy to find, it is very easy to decode and therefore defraud. So this was strike 2. And by the way, it only took 20 minutes to crack the code, meaning it was not encrypted whatsoever. So, this stands as being strike 2. Please bear in mind that every time you pay with PayPass, even though the machine is shortwave and does not go very far, it is also being projected multiple feet away from the receiver, meaning it's being broadcast to anybody within the vicinity. Anybody with a sensitive enough receiver can get your information from your credit card or debit card in midair. Be careful. Now, to prevent a whole lot of fraud, Europay, MasterCard, and Visa came up in a joint venture to create the chip and PIN card, which we would all know of as today. It is also called the EMV card or the IC card. But folks, for the terms of this podcast, we're going to call it the chip and PIN card. Now, this chip and PIN card is supposed to use multi-factor authentication, which is a brilliant idea when executed correctly. It's actually requiring an object you own in your possession, your debit card with the chip, with a PIN number that only you should know, inside a machine that only the merchant can get, using a chip that is supposed to be able to verify the authenticity of the point of sale machine and the transactions through the internet. Therefore, theoretically being more secure than the magnetic stripe payment method, which in fact it is not. Now, the problem with the magnetic stripe payment method and the PIN chip card are as follows. The point of sale device can be pre-bugged or bugged after being sent. It is more oftenly sent pre-bugged. So instead of blaming the merchant, you might want to blame the manufacturer instead. You can actually find all the sources to my stuff inside the sources of this show at www.zedaxis.net. So let's continue on. We know that the point of sale machine can be compromised, and we've known this for a long time. What most people didn't take into account is the fact that it can be compromised before it got to the merchant. Because once it gets to the merchant, it's detectable using Bluetooth for the most part is what they would use. But being pre-bugged, they don't know where the machine's going, so they often use GSM. So it sends out as a text message to other places in the world the credit card information on a set, nobody knows how often, amount of times every given so often time period. Now, again, that is in the show notes and my sources as well. The other problem is the chip is not encrypted. They actually had the option of going between the current model chip and an asymmetrically encrypted chip. They chose the card that cost $1 less, and at the time they emitted 70 million cards, only saving $1 per card, so 70 million. Unfortunately, there are billions of dollars of fraud per year, meaning this was an extremely bad investment because they're now using an unsecured card instead of a secured card. What's the difference? Well, a mathematically generated code used to prevent fraud can be cracked by a child, whereas asymmetrically encrypted information requires knowing what the equations were and knowing what the passwords are, otherwise you cannot crack it, which means you would have been better off with the asymmetrically encrypted card. But furthermore, the PIN number. Let's analyze this PIN number. We're not going to even analyze the quality of the card because it is crap and fragile and breaks all the time, and I've had to replace my card several times. So let's get beyond this part. Let's look at the fact of the PIN. For nearly 2 decades, you've been able to use, at least in various agencies, something called a single usage PIN number or password. It is now even so common to be able to use it that it is virtually usable on any smartphone in anyone's possession. You can now buy from PayPal a credit card size single usage PIN reader, and you can get on your keychain such thing as well from TOT and other companies as well. Now, it being so common and so easy and readily deployable as a solution for the PIN number problem, why didn't it get introduced into the credit card? Must be about money, because this would have prevented people from actually having to do several things with PINs. One, being required to choose a PIN or be forced a PIN upon you that has nothing to do with you. Two, remembering a PIN number. For those who have memory issues, you would actually like the single usage PIN number because it requires no effort of memory from you, meaning people who suffer troubles of memory caused by physical accidents or ailments like Alzheimer's wouldn't have to remember the PIN, and it is easy to use. You press a single button for the most part on every single one of these devices. Or you turn them on your smartphone and the code is right there with the timer. So, not deploying the single usage PIN and not encrypting the card is a problem. Now, what is the other problem? You're trying to prevent fraud from occurring. How do you do this? Well, when you're using multi-factor authentication, you might as well include biometrics. If you required a fingerprint, an ocular scan, or a voice print authentication to be done, you can verify that it is a person. And if the person didn't have any imprints on their hands because they didn't have hands, using fingerprint biometrics is kind of useless, so having multiple biometric authentication is by far better and less, singling out of people than the counterpart. So, by allowing people not to have to remember the PIN and using biometric comparison, you could have authenticated the person by using their iris, their fingerprint, or their voice print, because these are things that only they have, using a PIN number from a machine that is unique every 30 seconds on an object that only they own, using a card that was encrypted that only they can possess inside a machine, which I would suggest that governments actually verify before that only the merchant can get. So, furthermore, the things we need to do are as follows. They need to pass laws protecting the clients of this country and all countries around the world. To date, I haven't found any other country except for the UK that has instilled a law such as in 2009, the UK enforcing a law stating that all banks need to prove that the clients are in fact guilty of fraud and not the clients trying to prove that they're innocent of fraud. Because according to the majority of the criminal codes in the world, you are innocent until proven guilty and not otherwise. So, the banks need to be reminded that you're innocent and they're the one who's guilty, and that they can't hold you guilty until they prove you're guilty. You're innocent of this because they failed to protect your financial interests, and they should be prosecuted like those who defraud you because they're also wasting your time and money. There are plenty of people losing salary out there. There's probably somebody who's been fired because of this. The banks should be held liable for this, just as the credit card companies should be held liable for this. They should be held liable for fraud and theft of your time and fraud on your accounts, because they, through lack of judgment, actually caused this problem to occur. After all the technology that was made available, yes, fraud would continue to occur. Yes, it would continue to happen. But folks, the totality of the fraud would be reduced to only the most, achieving people capable of doing fraud. Not every Joe and John Smith in the world. So, if the people were made to have to use systems that are by far more complicated to compromise, then it would be harder to defraud. Therefore, it would reduce the instances of fraud occurring. So, I also have a few suggestions for you people. Always sign the back of your credit card or write the words, "Please identify me," on the back if you don't want to sign it. Never give your credit card over the phone. Never whatsoever, unless you are perfectly sure that it is a trusted merchant. My hint? Caller ID. If it is not the actual person or the caller ID is hidden or unknown, treat it as though it was spam. Even if it is the credit card company themselves, force them to use a line that can be easily identified. Also, keep an eye on your credit card when using your payment method. Do not look at the person behind you, or to the side of you, or outside. Look at your card. Watch it, because that is one point where the card can be compromised. Also, verify the point of sales machine is genuine. It is easy to do. You just hold it in your hands. If it feels loose, or it has screws that are visible on the back, the stickers on the back that identify it are worn or in misuse, or the machine seems to be tampered with, do not use it. By the way, the sticker on the back always looks pristine. Even if the ink comes off of it, the sticker stays there perfectly, as though it was a brand new hockey card coming off the line. It's pristine. Also, always take a receipt for the transaction for comparison with your bank statements. Therefore, you can verify that the transaction does not have any bogus charges in it. Also, whenever your card is lost or stolen, call the bank. And if your card is stolen, make a police report every single time. This will be the best 15 minutes of your life ever. Because, as I stated, to date, I've only found one country in the world. Of course, I didn't look all that hard, but of course, when you type in laws that protect people, there's not that many coming up. That many countries are protecting the interests of the citizens. They're protecting the interests of the commercial empires. When you write that police report, that acts as a buffer between you and the bank. If they try to make it look like you're guilty, you have proof you're not responsible. So if they do not reimburse you, you can charge them with theft because you can bring them through court. Mr. Judge, I was robbed. I did my due diligence. I filled out a police report. I notified my bank upon theft. And they are saying it is my fault. It is not your fault. It is their problem. You did your due diligence. You have the police report to back you up. This will be amazing amount of information for your lawyer to help you. And just remember, when suing the bank for their lack of due diligence, remember to make them pay the charges of your lawyer. You're not responsible for a single cent. Also make sure that you're paid for time loss. Because get this, people, there are millions of dollars of people's money being lost trying to recover money that they already had. So don't forget to get that back. Also, do not reply to any emails by sending out your credit card information, unsolicited or solicited. Do not send your credit card information because, like all those payment methods I told before, they're not encrypted. They're plain text. Means anybody or any server can see the information as it's being passed from one place to the next. If you need to pay somebody over the internet, use your bank account by sending a directed payment like CentraPay, or here's an idea, PayPal.com. It's a dead giveaway. More secure than any other thing that you can possibly think of as an idea of sending your payment on the internet, because they only ask you to send an email address. Nothing else. Then you can pay them securely, knowing you won't be compromised. And you have the option of a single-use PIN. Imagine that. That is by far more secure than using your credit card on the internet. Which reminds me, when paying with your credit card on the internet, make sure that you're within a secure session and not within a public session. That way, you won't get ripped off by some bogus overnight merchant trying to sell you absolutely nothing for your money. And folks, just so that we continue on a topic that is worthwhile to you, next week I'll explain how to maintain your identity in a safe fashion on the internet. Let's call it protecting your identity online. And this time, I'm not going to go through like all those other YouTube shows that are going to tell you you can protect your ID by changing your IP address. That is completely bogus. Let me remind you that changing your IP address still leads to your computer, meaning you can still be tracked. So what? You saved yourself 10 seconds of tracking. If you have people downloading content on your computer, you're still screwed. So folks, next week, protecting your online identity. This week, remind yourself, protect your financial identity. Make sure you notify your bank that you're not going to take this bullshit anymore. You want multi-factor authentication that is worth your time. Next time you get defrauded by somebody, bear in mind, I told you it would happen, and this is what they should have done, but didn't. Have a great day and weekend. If you agree with the show, or you like what I told you, or that you're also just as pissed off as me, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to like. Maybe if we have enough people liking this kind of information being sent out, if we have enough people showing the flaws of the governments and the credit card companies and the banks and financial institutes, will they stop fucking around with us? We want our stuff to be safe. They want to save money. They're going to save money by making our stuff safe. Have a great day.